Thank you again, Bernadette, for making the time to chat with me. I know with the upcoming release of The Guest, you've got all kinds of interviews and events lined up. So really appreciate you sparing the time to chat with Listening Books today. I wonder if you could start us off just by telling us a little about The Guest and the setup.
Yes, of course. So in The Guest, my main characters, so it's a couple, Iris and Gabriel, and they have gone away on a holiday together to try and get over some trauma because Gabriel had an experience when he found a young lad dying in a quarry and he wasn't able to save him, and this has traumatized him. And so they've gone away on this kind of holiday, and I was just hoping that Gabriel will open up to her and tell him why he can't get over this. And they come home and he hasn't opened up to her. So she's quite frustrated about that. And she gets home to find that Law, their French friend, has moved into their house while they were away. And it's not really as creepy as it seems because they do have keys to each other's houses, so they can use them when the other couple aren't there. But she doesn't seem to want to leave. And she's left her husband, Pierre, because she's found out that he's had a child with another woman. And so they're very happy to help us. I think we all would be happy to help a friend in need. But then she kind of overstays her welcome. And I'm sure we've all had guests as well who have overstayed their welcome, but probably not with the consequences that it has for Law, Iris, Gabriel, and other friends in their circle.
Yeah, I would say the premise just by itself of finding an unexpected house guest who doesn't leave is all on its own full of tension, and then you add all the extra
Yes,
psychological thriller stuff.
that's right. I think I could have gone anywhere. I mean, I could have made that book into not a psychological thriller, but of
Right.
course, I'm known as a psychological thriller writer, so I have to add in a bit of murder and mayhem, and But it was quite good fun. I think I could have delved deeper into Law being a really annoying guest. I would have liked to have explored that part, but you only have so many words, and you have
Yeah.
a story to tell. So, and you need to get to the end. So, but I thought that would have been quite a good book if I could have just concentrated on Law being the unwanted guest.
Were those some editorial decisions? Did you have bits about her cut in order to make the
No,
story move?
not at
No.
all, not
Okay.
at all. I think I was very concentrated on the story that I had to tell, the end I wanted to get to. And no, it was only afterwards I thought, well, I could have made more of that. But I think
Yeah.
once you've written a book and it's gone out, it's going to be printed. That's the point where you think, oh, I can't go back now. And but then I would have had to lose other parts of the book. So
Right.
it is fine. It's good. I think she's
I mean,
annoying enough.
you could take the same premise and write the book again as a comedy.
Yes, absolutely. I might do that one day. I keep thinking I might change genres, so you never know.
um, so I think this is your seventh book. Correct me
Mhm.
if I'm wrong on that. I wonder, was there anything new that you wanted to try with this book?
Yes, actually, there was. And I only realised that when I had a look at it the other day. And that's that I wrote it in the past, which is quite unusual for me. I think, yes, it's all in the past tense, which I've always written in the present tense. And the only reason I changed is because, well, I think it's good to explore other ways of writing. I tried it in the present and it wasn't really working. I must admit, I switched a few times between past and present, thinking which is the one that works here. And it's just that one of my daughters has always said that if a book is written in the present tense and in the first person, she won't read it.
Oh.
So, and that's mine, usually present tense. She makes an exception for mine, of course. But I've had a couple of readers coming back to me and saying, I find it really off putting when people write in the first person or write in the
Mm,
present tense. But I think it means I can get myself into the character very well like that. But I did want to try something different. I tried it for the previous book, The Prisoner, kept changing between past and present. And in the end, I didn't write it in the past. I mean, there was the past. There's a part that's past, so that's obviously in the past. But the main story was in the present. So this time I thought, right, I think this is the kind of book that lends itself to the past tense, to more of a storytelling.
hmm
So it worked. I think it's worked well.
And did you shift to the third person as well?
I think I have done four. So um, it alternates between chapters. It's quite hard to remember now. It alternates between chapters between Iris and Gabriel. And yes, they're in the past and in the third person.
Right. Yeah.
So it was a big change for me.
That's great. That so I actually had this written down as one of my questions because I'd noticed that your previous books had all been written in the first person.
Yeah, oh,
Um,
great.
yeah. So I was kind of wondering if you might want to say a little about like what that offers you as a writer, and maybe particularly I imagine within this genre of
Mm.
psychological thriller.
I think it's just the way that you see. So if I write in the present tense, or especially the first person, I feel that I am that person. I'm living, and that was very necessary for the prisoner, because the prisoner is about a girl, well, who was kept prisoner, and I really needed to be her to be in that dark space to try and imagine what she would do and how she would react and everything. So and most of my books are like that. But for the guest, for me, it was more of an overview. I was looking down on my characters, and so I wasn't necessarily Iris or necessarily Gabriel. I was just watching them. So for me, it's that. I think.
Yeah.
I think it's more of a. I think the third person is more of a, and the past is more of a storytelling narrative.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it made me wonder if you'd ever in your previous books, which were all in first person present, if you were ever tempted, if you wanted to relay information to the reader, but found it hard to do so because it was important that the character not know that particular detail. Did,
I
that's very
see what you
specific, isn't it?
mean. But I'm quite, yes, I do see what you mean, but I have a quite good hand on,
Mm,
I think I'm quite clear about what I need to release to the reader when. So I'm
mm,
quite, close in with my character. And I see what you mean. You get so involved, you are that character. But I'm quite good at distancing myself as well, being that character and also being the author.
okay,
So
yeah.
hopefully I've avoided that.
So, did you enjoy this process of writing in the past tense and third person? Are you happy to do that more?
I think I'd like to. With my next book, I don't think it's going to be possible, but I found the guest the easiest of my books to write.
Oh, really?
Now, I don't know why that was. It was a really, and I'm saying this, I'm sorry if there's any authors watching but I hardly had any edits on it once I'd done
Oh,
the first draft.
wow.
Mind you, I usually do, when I say it's a first draft that I hand to my agent and my editors, it's a pretty good first draft normally. But I expect to do 2 rounds of edits after that. And I think I only did 1 round
Wow.
because I just managed to get that story, the first time round. And they didn't particularly want to change anything in that story. So
Wow.
there were just a couple of tweaks. I really felt it was an easy book to write. Whereas my next one is not an easy book to write. So I'm struggling quite a bit with that one. But you get some that are much harder than others.
Yeah.
That I tend to do one book. So the prisoner I found quite tricky to write. Now I've had the guest, which isn't. And now my next one I know is going to be tricky. And I think the one I have an idea for the one I've done, and I think that'll be smoother. So I tend to do what I call one difficult book and then one easier book, and that's the way
Okay.
it's kind of gone for me. So we'll see if that's the case, if it continues like that. But
Yeah. Oh, well, I wonder with all the events surrounding the launch of The Guest, but it sounds like you're already working on the one after The Guest. Is it
yes,
hard to move back and forth between those
it's
headspaces?
yes, it is a little bit because for me the guest was finished well probably almost a year ago or a good 6 months ago because that's when, especially when you work with the states, they need a really long run in to
Right.
publication day, so they want it finished well ahead. It's not just like 3 months ahead, it has to be finished quite long. So then you're already into your next book. So sometimes, and for example, I might get a questionnaire in to answer about a book that's only just been published in a foreign country. So for example, the breakdown might only now be coming out, and I have to really think about that book and what happened, because of course you're just caught up in the book. And it's really strange because for me anyway, once I finished a book, that's it. The characters tend to go out of my mind because I'm so involved in the next book.
Right. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think you have to let go.
The audiobook of The Guest is narrated by Emily Joyce.
Mhm.
I wonder, were you involved in the casting at all?
um, you are a little bit. For some books I've been sent, for example, 3 audios to listen to, and I can kind of say, well, I prefer this voice or this voice. And I know for one of my books, like for the male voice, we couldn't get it right, and then I realised he had to have an Irish accent.
Oh,
So and I kept thinking it doesn't sound like he should sound. So Emily Joyce, they just said, we think Emily's great for this. Have a listen to her reading your first chapter. And I thought she was perfect. Um, so I didn't come back and say anything. You know, she's great. And I've had a couple of really, I've had, I'm not going to be able to remember her name now. She's brilliant. She's read 2 of my books already, or 3. So you have
Is
them and
it
you know that they're
Georgia
really good.
Maguire?
Yeah, Georgia Maguire.
Yeah,
Love
yeah.
Georgia Maguire. Absolutely love her, you know. So I'm hoping she'll read another of my books. She's brilliant.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about her because I did notice that she had read a
Yeah.
few of them, and I wondered, was there anything about her narration that particularly stands out to you?
I just love her voice. I just love the tone in her voice. I love the way she reads. I think she's brilliant. So you know, I'd always be happy to have George Maguire, but I love Emily as well. I think that she did a really good job, and I've had a lot of compliments about Emily from readers who've listened to the book, and I don't really call them readers if they listen to a book. I've just realised, but anyway, they have listened to the audio and have loved it and said that Emily's great. So that's great. But I
That
don't have
one,
much contact with them, you know, so it's a shame, really. Um,
yeah. Do you ever listen to the finished product yourself?
um, Not all the way through. One of the reasons is because I don't have time. So I've never listened to any of my books all the way through. I always imagine one day sitting down, you know, and taking a week off and just listening to all my audio books or whatever. But it's like I don't read them when they come back from the print. When I get my final copies, I'll read a proof copy, of course, but just to catch any last things. But you know, I don't read my books. I don't have time, and also I'm worried I'd be disappointed and think, well, I
Yeah.
know. I mean, you always think you could have done better. As I said, once your book goes out there, you wish you could snatch it back and think, I should have done this, I should have done that. So you learn to let go. But for example, Behind Closed Doors, I would never read that. I'd be scared to read it because I would just think, oh my gosh, I could have done that so much better because it was my first book, and you gain experience as you go along. So there's a lot of things about that book that I'd probably tweak, you know.
Yeah.
So I won't go there. I'll never read that one, I don't think, or any of them. I won't read any of them.
Is there anything that comes to mind when you talk about that, or the things that you get better at, or that you learn along the way?
Yes, I think one of the things that I've noticed is you don't have to put he said, she said after each sentence, for example.
Mm.
You know, and it's no good just putting he said, he said, he said. You have to the said can't be repeated too many times, so you have to put he asked. Or so you get very good. So if I went back to Behind Closed Doors, I think I'd cringe at a lot of things because I think that it's only when you get more experience that you realize actually you don't need to put he said after that sentence because it's obvious that he was saying that in reply. And it's things that I pick up in when I read books as well, that there might be too many he said, she said, or whatever, because you don't need always to point out that somebody, so that's just a little thing. But I think you get better at that and better at taking out words that you tend to repeat, like just.
Mm.
So I'll always do a word thing after where I look how many just I've put into a book, and I think I need to take out at least half of those. Or the word that we can use too often as well. It's just little things that you learn as an author to tidy up your manuscript and to make it just go a bit better. But I'm sure
Yeah.
I've got a lot to learn. I think for this book, for the guest, I think it was my Dutch, no, it wasn't my Dutch, it was my US proofreader or whatever, came back and said, do you realize how many times you've used the word realize? And I'd used
Oh,
the word realize so many times. So, you can find a synonym. Oh, I understood that, instead of I
right.
realized, or whatever. And that's a word I use a lot, especially when I'm writing. Was I writing in the first book? I wasn't then. So that was for The Prisoner. No, I think it was for The Prisoner. I'm not sure which book it was, but anyway, I had used it an awful lot of times in my manuscript. So, it's great that you have people that will catch things like that.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
yes, we owe a lot to our copy editors and proofreaders.
What I wanted to talk about was some of the books that you have written that have been optioned for screen adaptation. Um,
Mhm.
and the breakdown in particular, the film based on that, is now in the final stages of production, I believe. Um, I wonder, was having your work adapted for the screen, was that an ambition from the start of your writing career?
It sounds stupid, but I knew nothing about writing when I was first published. I didn't have any author friends. I didn't know any publishers, and I had no idea that books could be made into films. Well, I'd probably seen a film that said based on the book by, but it didn't occur to me that any of my books would ever be made into film. It just wasn't even a dream because it just wasn't there. I didn't realize it until Behind Closed Doors came out, and it was optioned straight away for a film. But luckily, my agent said, it's lovely, wonderful news. Don't get too excited because most times the films aren't made. You know, a lot of time it's
Right.
really hard to get to those final stages of production. And for example, for Behind Closed Doors, although it was optioned straight away, so we're talking about 6 years ago, 7 years ago now, that was never made by the company that originally took it.
Mm.
So because they would try, but it is, I understand the process more. So they would have a director in place, but then they needed the actors and actresses, but one of them wouldn't be available, or they'd be available, but they couldn't find the director or the producer, or so it you think it's about to go into production, but there's always something that falls by the wayside that makes it not happen. So then it was out there on the market, and I was very lucky because the wonderful producer who took the breakdown, who read the breakdown and loved the breakdown, and to her absolute credit, got it made, to the final stages. It's actually been filmed. She's also taken Behind Closed Doors, and also The Therapist. And so I think The Therapist is hopefully going to go into production this year, and Behind Closed Doors possibly next year, which would be great. But as I say, there's a lot of things that come into play, and it's not always sure that these films will be made. But the breakdown is there. Let's just hope that it makes it to either television or screen. I mean, it has been sold to various countries, so I am hoping that I'll get to see it.
Yes. Well, after all that's gone into it now, I would hope it does
Yeah.
get released. It's called something different though, and I forgot to write that down. Um, Black Hall. What is
Blackwater Lane, because where the action takes place in my book is called Blackwater Lane, and
Blackwater
they've
Lane?
decided to use that as a title instead of the breakdown. So the breakdown for me was the three things: the breakdown of the car, the breakdown of the marriage, and the breakdown of Cass. That's my character, Cass. So which is why we chose the breakdown, because it was kind of, it just covered the three
Yes.
strands going through the book. But they want to call it Blackwater Lane, which is great. And I was lucky enough to go to see it being filmed on 2 occasions, and that was amazing
Oh
because both
wow.
times,
Yeah.
yeah, because you know, it's there's things in the book that aren't in the film,
Okay.
and there's things, of course, that so it goes both ways. But the twice that I went to set, they were actually filming a scene that I had written, and that was amazing just to see the actors speaking the lines that I had written. And I thought they'd probably change them a bit, but they don't. They actually say
Wow.
them word for word, and
Wow.
that was quite an amazing experience. And you actually see the scene that you created in your head come to life. So it's a real privilege to have a book made into a film, and I'm sure it'll be a great film. I think as I say, there's going to be some things in the film that aren't in my book,
Yeah.
but I think that's great. It's all poetic license or whatever, and I'll be happy to see the end result. I think it'll be great.
And it sounds to me like you were happy to sort of give them the freedom to do with it as they would rather than be involved in the screenwriting or
I wasn't really asked if I wanted to be involved for this book, but I have been for the next ones. But I
okay.
think, if I had seen anything, I mean, there's one little thing I did notice when they were filming, and I did point it out, and they did change it,
Okay.
because I just thought, oh, that actually might not be understood or whatever. It was a tiny thing, but they listened to me because I happened to be there, and they did change that. So that was great. I don't think I saw the script. I did see the script, and I think if there'd been anything in the script that I'd really not liked, they would have taken that on board, because they're very nice. They do want an author to be happy with the
Yeah.
film. So I know for the next one, for Behind Closed Doors on The Therapist, I've seen the screenplay for The Therapist already, and great. So
That's
yeah, they do. They're very good like that. I feel very lucky.
that's really exciting, and it must be very gratifying to see the things that you've
Mm,
written come to life
yes,
as
yeah,
the
it is.
actors. Yeah.
Yeah, it is incredible. Because you just know it's something I never imagined. I mean, I never imagined I'd have a book published, let alone a film made of one of my books. So I just sometimes I think, wow, is this really happening? I don't think about it too much, but I think probably when I'm old, very old, one day when I'm not writing anymore, I'll sit back and look at it and think, yeah, actually that was great. But when you're actually involved in the day to day of it, you don't really notice it. You don't spend too much time thinking about it.
I mean, does it affect the way that you write now? Do you think cinematically as you write? No.
No, I never have done. I
Okay.
never have done, but I do think that my books, probably lend themselves to films in a way, just because they're quite action packed and because there's usually a dynamic about relationships. You know, my books are quite relationship focused. Anything I wrote behind closed doors were just relationship books, because I love exploring relationships, whether it's between friends or husbands and wives or partners or whatever. I really like to focus on that. So I think from that point of view, you know, people do like watching, you know, relationships. They do like looking at things that happen to other people. So I think that, you know, I mean, I never considered my books as being, you know, I never thought, oh, I'm going to write this so that, you know, it might get picked up. And I haven't since. Even, you know, The Prisoner, I didn't write it with that in mind. The Guest, I haven't written that in mind at all. You know, and I think some books, you know, The Dilemma, for example, that would be quite hard maybe to turn into a film. I think
Mm.
just some books lend themselves more to film than others.
Yeah, that no, that's fair. I think I might, if I were a writer, be tempted to write something that I knew would adapt well to film.
But perhaps that's what some authors do. I don't know. You know, maybe there are authors that write with a film in mind,
Yeah.
but I've never done that. And actually, it'd be interesting to know if there are, you know, authors that write specifically, you know, with a film in mind at the end. And I know some authors do write screenplays as well. So, you know, maybe they do adapt their own books into screenplays, which is a
Well,
skill that, you know, amazing.
yeah. I did talk to one author who that was from the beginning. I'm trying to remember which author that was. From the beginning, it before they even started writing the book, they knew it was also going to be adapted
Right.
to a film,
Wow.
and they were asked to do the
A screenplay
screenplay as
for it.
well. So that was an interesting
Yes.
way to go about it. But I was also just thinking about, you know, there's been a lot of discussion lately online that I've seen anyway about readers who actually picture everything. They can see everything unfolding in their heads as they read it. And other readers who actually don't have really much, if any, imaging going on as they read. It's more about the thinking and the feeling, and
Mm-hmm.
not seeing. So I wonder if that maybe plays into it with writers as well. If some of them are just naturally more visually attuned because they see it playing out in their heads as they write.
Yeah, I think that might be the case. I know when I used to read when I was young, and it happens to me now if I'm reading my book or rereading what I've written, you know, I might decide, oh, I'm halfway through the book, I'm going to go back and read it. If it's a stormy, dark day in my book, when I actually stop reading, I'm really surprised to find it's a bright, sunny day, because
Hmm.
I'm absolutely, and that used to happen to me when I was younger. So I think I'm probably quite visual, because I
Hmm.
used to actually think that, you know, I'd stop reading, be really surprised to look out of my bedroom window and find that it wasn't raining, you know, and that even happens to me now. So yeah, I think there are different ways of, I think, I'm sure everybody approaches a book in a different way, or has different, we're all individuals. So we all, you know, experience things in different ways. Some are more visual, others are more whatever.
Yeah. Um, if we switch gears a little bit, I wonder if I can ask you about your pen name, B.A. Paris, and how
Oh,
you came to choose that.
yes. Okay. So I never wanted anybody to know I was writing a book. I never knew a book would be published. So when I started sending out, I did use my name, but I was very conscious, my real name, but I was really conscious that I didn't want to use this name if my book ever got published. Or maybe it hadn't even occurred to me. But anyway, when it eventually was picked up, and it was going to be published, I said, well, I don't want people to know that I've written a book, because I hadn't even told of course, my husband and daughters knew. But for example, my wider family, I told my sister, but I didn't tell my brothers or my parents. I mean, and I think this is because, I don't know, it's really strange. Even though I don't like saying I'm an author. So if
Hmm.
people say, what do you do? I usually say I work in publishing if I
Hmm.
meet them for the first time, because I don't really want to say I'm an author, because I always it sounds very, um, to say you're an author, for me, authors are the great people like, I don't know, Agatha Christie, just Margaret Atwood, and I would never consider myself anything like them. So to say I'm an author just sounds very pretentious, I think. So I try not to say it. Um, and then my husband will probably say it for me. But you know, so at the beginning, I didn't want anybody to know it was me. And when it came to choosing a name, I wanted a name that meant something to me. And so, because when I left home, when I was 21, I went straight to Paris, and I've lived in France for most of my life. I only came back to the UK a few years ago. So I've lived for, 35 years in France. And so Paris was where I first went. I love Paris. So I just decided Paris. And when I was little, I used to go to the Paris School of Dancing for ballet lessons. And it sounded so exotic. It was just in my hometown in England, but it was called the Paris School of Dancing. And my teacher was called Miss Paris. And I just thought this was so exotic. And I had huge, very fond memories of doing ballet when I was little. So Paris just seemed the right way to go.
I was wondering as well if using the initials at the beginning, if there was any, if the desire to avoid any potential sexism in readers' choices played into that. No.
It didn't even occur to me. The only reason I chose my initials is because I'm not very happy with. I don't really feel like a Bernadette. My name has never sat well with me.
Oh.
I don't know why. I've just never been comfortable with my name. So I just didn't want Bernadette Paris on the front of the book. And I
Mm.
thought, I'm just going to use my initials. Then I just thought nobody would pick up a book written by somebody called Bernadette. That's how I feel about my name, which is silly. But I just thought, oh, it's not a pretty name. It's kind of an off-putting name for me personally. So yeah, I mean, in a way, I should have just chosen Sophie or something, which I love. I have a daughter called Sophie. I should have chosen Sophie and been Sophie Paris, but I just thought, oh, I'll just put my initials. So there's a little bit of me on there, but not all of me on there. So, but yeah, it just came from a desire for people not to know that I'd written a book.
Um, I do think that your path to becoming a writer is probably a really encouraging story for a lot of aspiring writers.
Mhm.
And I wondered if you could maybe say a little about the path that you took to writing and what the catalyst was that really made you take action.
I think the catalyst was my daughter. I mean, I'd always wanted to write. Ever since I was young, I wanted to be a writer, but it was always at the back of my mind. And at one point, I wrote some children's stories. I think I sent them off and they got rejected, but this was when I was quite young. But it was always there at the back of my mind that once the children were grown up, I would maybe do something for myself. And my daughters knew that I wanted to write, but for me, it was always about children. It was always going to be children's stories, children's books that I was going to write. And one of my daughters had an idea for a book, and she said, will you write it for me? And I said, I'm not going to write a book for you, but. And then I saw that this is going back to, it must have been 2007. I was in England, I picked up a Sunday Times, and there was a competition for a novel of 80,000 words. So I told my daughter, she was in France, and I said, look, you can write your book. Um, and she said, well, I can't, because if you look, you have to be 18. And she was only 16 at the time. And she said, but why don't you write a novel and enter the competition? And I just said, oh, no, I want to write children's books, nice and short. I thought that was easy. But of course, I know now that writing children's books isn't easy at all. But at the time, I thought it was kind of an easy way to start. And her faith in me, she said, well, of course you can. She said, I'm sure you can. And it was just her faith that I could write a novel of 80,000 words. So I went to bed that night and I was thinking, can I? And I came up with this idea of a story about a family. Went back to France a couple of days later, bought a computer, laptop, I didn't have one, and just started writing. And I just became obsessed with writing. And for 6 months, I became this awful person. But I mean, I went from this mother that baked cakes and was always there and always around and had, to this, I remember my daughter saying, barely say hello to us when we're coming from school because I would just sit in front of my computer all day long and write. I became obsessed. And it took me about 6 months to calm down
Hmm.
and realize that actually I could leave my book and walk away from it and, come back and pick up. But it became, I think it was just after maybe, how old was my eldest daughter then? Probably about in her 20s, just having had over 20 years of concentrating solely on the children,
Hmm.
just doing that, because even my working life revolved around them. When I went back to work, I was a teacher, so I'd be there to take them in the morning, pick them up at lunchtime, because they used to come home for lunch. Then I'd go back to work in the afternoon, but be there to pick them up in the evening, when they finished, take them to all their activities. So it was a really full on child focused life that I had. And I think just to discover that I could do something for myself was just amazing. And yes, I have my daughter to thank. That was the catalyst. And of course, yes, I mean, it took me a long time. It took me, that was 2007, I think 2008. I was published in 2016. So,
Okay.
and I didn't
Wow.
start sending out till about 2010. So, it's quite a long process. It didn't happen overnight for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, but it's been wonderful. So I really have my daughter to thank. She was the catalyst. And also that need to do something for myself, I think, that was
Yeah.
very innate in me. I just kept thinking, sometimes I think I just need to do something for myself.
Yeah.
So
Did you end up using her idea as the
no,
story?
she
No.
still has it and the title. She's now, how old is she? Oh gosh, Celine must be, she's 32 now, and she still
Okay.
hasn't written that book. And
Is she
every
going
she
to?
yes, she keeps saying, you still got to write that book for me, mummy. But it's a very loose plot. I mean, the work, and I don't think it's not a thriller. Well, I think it is a thriller, but not my sort of, not a psychological thriller. So no,
Okay.
I'm afraid she'll have to write that one herself.
That competition, you didn't win the competition, right?
Oh
That
God,
was
no, I
right.
didn't even get a letter back. I mean,
Really?
no. Yes, but when when I saw who won, I just thought, well, that's incredible. I mean, it was just beyond. I think it was probably a sci-fi book anyway that won,
Okay.
or something like that. I really can't remember, but it was something completely so different to the kind of run-of-the-mill book that I had written, which I still have and would love to be published one day. It now spans about 5 books. It's a family saga,
Oh, wow.
which I may go back to one day, but it's not at all a psychological thriller. And once you publish one psychological thriller, you just you have to do two and then you have to do three. And I did get a bit of stick for the dilemma because it wasn't really a psychological thriller. And there were readers that were disappointed, even though it wasn't billed as a psychological thriller. We never said this is
Oh.
a psychological thriller, but people were expecting that. So they kept looking for the massive twist at the end, and there wasn't one,
Oh,
of course.
right.
So then, I had to go back to writing psychological thrillers, which is fine.
Oh, it's a
I
bit
enjoy
like an
it.
actor being typecast. It's really hard to get
It
out of it.
is a little bit. I think once, you do have, I was very fortunate with Behind Closed Doors. It sold extremely well. It's touched a lot of people. So once you're known for that type of book, there's no way you can change genre for a while after that, or forever. I don't know. You know, I mean, there are other books I do want to write. I mean, I just want to write books that might not necessarily be thrillers,
Yeah.
psychological thrillers, just relationship books. I don't know whether I'll ever get to that point where I'll be able to do that. Um, that's the future. We'll see.
Well, I hope you do for your own satisfaction. Um,
I'd like to.
Bernadette, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would love to mention?
I can't think of anything. You've really covered it well. I've loved your questions because they've been really interesting and touched on aspects that people haven't asked me about before in a way. So,
Oh,
yes, but I can't think of anything else. I mean, I just feel very lucky to have had this life that I never imagined. And, I think the thing is, I never set out to be a best-selling author, if you like. I mean, I just couldn't believe that my book was actually going to be published. And I remember one of my brothers just laughing. And when my sister said, "Did you know Bennett's going to have a book published?" And he just laughed and laughed. And he said, "I can't believe you think anybody's going to buy your book." He
oh,
hadn't read it. But,
excuse
this is
me.
this is what big brothers, this is quite mean, but this is what big brothers are like. And he was just rocking backwards on his chair and laughing hysterically and saying, "I can't believe you think people are going to buy your book." And I said, "Well, it's going to be in Smith's or whatever." And I said, "I'm sure Mum will buy a couple of copies." And then, of course, it became this thing that just took off,
Hmm.
and nobody was more surprised than I was. I mean, I just didn't, and I think I didn't actually appreciate not appreciate it. I didn't realize what a big thing it was because, as I say, I wasn't subscribed to the bookseller. I didn't know any other authors. I didn't know. I didn't look up the charts really. I would see. I got Twitter because I was told to have Twitter, and people would say, my publisher might say, "Oh, you're at the top of the charts or whatever," and I'd go, "Oh, wonderful." I didn't actually know what that meant. You know, I didn't really have anything to compare it to. I'd never seen chart. I didn't realize really. It went over my head. I have to say, I was living in France, barely on social media. I didn't have Facebook or Instagram, anything. So it all went over my head. And I think, that was quite good in a way. That's quite good.
Hmm.
There wasn't any real fuss made of me in France or anything, or even in the UK for that matter. But probably because I was living abroad. So, I didn't really twig. And it was only actually when in the May, so 5 months after my book came out, um, my publisher invited me over. They said, "Next time you're in England visiting your parents, come and see us because we want to celebrate the fact that you've sold 500,000 copies." Well, for me, that didn't mean anything. I thought they're obviously pleased, because when I got there was champagne, and I remember saying, "Oh, why is 500,000 copies good?"
Oh.
And that's how naive I was about the whole publishing thing. Because
Yeah.
no, I'd love one of my books to sell 500,000 copies in 5 months. But I didn't understand because even though they told me and they were saying, congratulations, your book's sold 200,000 copies, it actually didn't translate into anything for me. I knew they were pleased with me, of course. I knew my book was doing well, but I had no idea how well. And
Hmm.
I think that was quite good. It's good not knowing really sometimes because I was just getting on with writing the next book then, and it all went
Yeah.
over my head.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, it almost sounds like the tremendous success was nearly wasted on you because you hardly experienced it internally. But on the other hand, it seems to have kept you very well grounded with your head firmly still on your shoulders or attached
Yes,
to your
I,
neck.
I think that's very true. I mean, yes, in a way, sometimes I think, gosh, I didn't really not enjoy it, appreciate the success because I didn't know really. It's only now sometimes when I look back and I think, oh, I'd love that to happen to one of my books now, you know, because with each book it gets harder. And but I think it was a very good place to be. I'm kind of an older writer. I wasn't living in this country, so I was very removed from it all, very detached from it all. And, I'm happy with that. I think when maybe in years to come, I will look back and say, well, crumbs, you didn't really appreciate that, did you? Or have time to appreciate it, but it's fine. It's good. It's all good. I'm very happy with the way things have turned out.
Well, Bernadette, thank you so much for making the time to chat with me today. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you a bit more. I'm wishing you lots of luck as you launch this newest book, and I hope you do get a chance to write some of the non-thriller ideas you've got as well.
Maybe in about 10 years' time. Thank you so much for the interview, Jessica. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.